Importers and exporters who want to be successful must know exactly how their goods will get from point A to point B, who will pay for which parts of the trip, and who is responsible if goods get damaged or lost along the way. This is done with the help of Incoterms, which is a standard set of rules that makes it easier for countries to trade with each other. Assalamualaikum, Ms. Azri and my fellow classmates. Hope you have a pleasant day this morning. I'm Nura Hafiza binti Zanuddin from class NBI 7A. My group members including Siti Balki binti Azhar, Zaharti Izzati binti Ahmad Zubaidi, and not to forget Siti Shahla binti Roslan. For this presentation, the chapter that will be presented today is Chapter 9, Incoterms. So, what is actually Incoterms?
I will presenting regarding the obligation and charges table that transfers between seller and buyers. This slide also show that who will responsible starting from packaging until loading and then to deliver to the buyer.
Alright, back to the previous slide. To be clear, Incoterms are widely accepted standards. They assist buyers and sellers in drafting and carrying out a contract for the transportation of products. A thorough examination of Incoterms 2020 will result in more favorable trade terms. It enables the maker and buyer to provide more efficient trade finance. Trade finance assists importers and exporters in their worldwide trade endeavors. Incoterms, or International Commercial Terms, were first defined by the International Chamber of Commerce in 1936, or ICC. Since 2010, Incoterms 2020 is the first upgrade to keep pace with the ever-changing global trading landscape. The most recent version of the regulations went into effect on 1st January 2020. It comprised of 11 distinct Incoterms with several changes that need discussion. By outlining import and export obligations, the Incoterms 2020 regulations increase security. Incoterms 2020 define in a formal way the point in a transaction where the risk of loss or damage to the good passes from the seller to the buyer. Before, on the other hand, the word meant something less formal. By making a list of import and export requirements, Incoterms 2020 rules make security more common. Next, let me tell you about the terms and conditions. When planning an overseas shipment, successful importers and exporters must know exactly how their goods will get from point A to point B, who will pay for which parts of the trip, and who is responsible if goods get damaged or lost along the way. This is done with the help of Incoterms, which is the set of rules that makes it easier for countries to trade with each other. The world over, governments, legal authorities, and practitioners all know what these terms mean. The ICC came up with the idea of Incoterms in 1921, and the first Incoterms rules were made in 1936. In 1936, they were given the name Incoterms. They are sometimes changed when something important happens in the world of trade. In 1953, 1967, 1976, 1980, 2010, and 2020. There were changes and new parts added.
Incoterms 2020 goes into effect on the 1st January 2020. All contracts concluded under the terms of the previous Incoterms 2010 edition will continue to be valid. Buyers and sellers will also be able to continue using Incoterms 2010 in the new contracts. However, they will have to clearly state their choice to use the earlier version of the Incoterm in their contract so as to avoid unplanned surprise, additional costs, and unplanned liability. If it subsequently emerges that the parties have different understanding of the rules to be followed, here are the benefits of the latest Incoterm. First, easy to choose the most appropriate terms. Incoterms 2020 aims to define the content of each of the terms more clearly, group similar terms, and allow comparison of the elements of each Incoterm rules. This enables parties to choose the option that best suit their situation and interest. Second, bill of lading for sea transport of goods. When a seller goes to be transported by the sea under the FCA, which is free carrier term, a seller or buyer or bank, the issue granted to them, requests a bill of lading, confirming loading on the board. However, under the FCA term, the seller delivery obligation expires upon delivery of the goods to the port prior to loading and board, so the seller has no further control over the cargo. Incoterms 2020 enable the party to agree the buyer, instruct the carrier to issue the seller of a bill of lading, confirming loading of the cargo on board. Thus, it is now advisable for the trader to opt for the FCA rather than FOB in terms for container and shipping. Third, specified cost allocation. Disputes between buyers and sellers regarding cost allocation are quite frequent, especially when a costs are incurred at port or at destination. Incoterms 2020 has refined and detailed attribution of costs to the buyer and seller by providing a list of eligible costs. Fourth, enhanced insurance coverage for manufactured goods. In Incoterms 2010, the IP term stipulate that the buyer deliver the goods to the deliverer and insure them against possible damage or loss during the transportation. The CIF, cost insurance and freight term, impose a similar obligation on a buyer when goods are transported by the sea, require insurance coverage cargo insurance coverage under the Essential Cargo Clause C, this is a minimum insurance coverage that does not necessarily meet the buyer's cargo protection requirement. So, usually suitable for a bulk transport, it does not provide sufficient protection for manufactured goods. The individual Incoterms always contain three letters. They were previously classified into four groups, C, D, E, and F, which was determined by the location of delivery for the goods and the responsibility of payment at different stages of international transport. This old classification caused some confusion, though, so the ICC group the updated Incoterms 2020 into two simpler categories. First, apply to any mode of transport which are ESW, FCA, CPT, CIP, DAP, DPU, and lastly DPP. Second, apply to sea and inland waterway transport only, which are FAS, FOB, CFR, and lastly CIF.
Next, our presenting regarding the purpose and scope of Incoterms. It helps countries involved in international trade in interpreting trade terms. For example, it's designed for a party to a contract. It also can provide international rules for foreign trade. Next, it also can reduce uncertainty. It also can avoid misunderstanding and dispute. Lastly, it also can avoid different interpretation in different countries. Next, it also can handle a number of identified obligations imposed on the party. It's clearly define the obligation between the seller and the buyer. It also can know who will transfer off the risk between the party. Lastly, deal with the obligation to clear the goods for the export and import, the packing of the goods, the buyer's obligation to take delivery. It's implementation of the contract of sale. There are a few things what do Incoterms not to do. The first one is not for service contract. Second, do not determine transfer of title. Third, do not determine branch of contract. And lastly, do not protect parties from the own risk of loss.
Here are 11 structure of Incoterm, which are EXW, ex-work, FCA, free carrier, FES, free alongside ship, FOB, free on board, CFR, cost and freight, CIF, cost, insurance and freight, CPT, carriage paid to, CIP, carriage and insurance paid to, DAP, delivered at place, DPU, delivered at place unloaded, DDP, delivered duty paid. The terminology examples like shipper, the person who delivers the product for transportation, and the person who enters into a contract with the carrier are both referred as to a shipper. Second is delivery. The buyer is required to take possession of the goods and provide them to the transporter upon delivery. If the buyer does not comply, he may be held responsible for compensating the seller who entered into the carriage contract with the carrier for damage. The term is also used in reference to the buyer's duty, which is to accept delivery of the goods. It serves as inspect to see when the vendor has completed delivery order or not. Next terminology is as usual. It is possible to determine what tradespeople typically do, and this behavior will serve as the main indicator. The word usual is really more useful than the word reasonable. Determining what is reasonable may be necessary. Seller's obligation. First, the items and the commercial invoice must be supplied by the seller. Second, pay the charge associated with those inspections that are required in order to deliver the products. Third one, the buyer is required to pay the price specified in the sale contract. And for charge, paid after the items are imported in accordance with the relevant import regulations.
Next, the type of Incoterms, which is EXW or EX works. The recipient takes the items from the supplier's facilities, which can be a store, warehouse, or other location. Except for the shipment of products, the supplier has no obligations. The recipient is responsible for all costs. EXW is not designed to deliver commodities to the EU. If the recipient is unable to export independently, EXW is not used. Domestic traffic is handled by EXW. The EXW condition is used to carry items by any mode of transportation. But who pays for the logistic costs? The cost distribution in accordance with the contract's Incoterm. Classification based on the seller's higher level of liabilities. The example for EX work is E-export costs are calculated by businesses that want to cut costs by removing the so-called seller value added for shipping. For example, suppose company A has priced a pair of printers from company B at $4,000 with an e-export shipping cost of $200. To save money, company A finds a third-party shipper to deliver the printers for $170. So, to save the $30 on shipping, they make an e-export deal with company B.
Next, in the Incoterms rules for FAS, short for free alongside ship, the seller clears goods for export and places them alongside the vessel at the named port of departure. The named port of departure location can be loading dock or a barge, but not a container terminal. FAS only applies to ocean or inland waterway transport. It is popular with bulk cargo such as oil or grain. In this rule, seller obligation is first, goods commercial invoice and documentation. Second, export packaging and marking. Third, export licenses and custom formalities. Fourth, free carriage to terminal. Fifth, delivery alongside vessel at port shipment. Sixth, proof of delivery. And last but not least, cost of pre-shipment inspection. Under this rule, buyer's obligation is first, pay the price of the goods as provided in the sales contract. Second, loading charge. Third, main carriage. Fourth, discharge on onward carriage. Fifth, import formality and duty. Last but not least, also cost of pre-shipment inspection for import and clearance. Under the shipping terms for the FCA Incoterms, short for free carrier, the seller is responsible for export clearance and delivery of goods to the carrier at the named place of delivery. Unless otherwise agreed upon, the seller is only responsible for loading the goods if the seller place of the business is the named place of delivery. A carrier is any person or company who undertakes the carriers, such as shipping line, airline, trucking company, railway or freight forwarder. Buyer must clearly specify the precise point of delivery in the contract of sales or carriage.
In this diagram, we show regarding the free on board, who will take the full responsible on this FOB. In this FOB term, seller need to take all risks starting from their delivery the goods, and then they need to do the port clearance until the seller loading the goods at the port. After the goods loaded at the port, and then the risk have been transferred from the seller to the buyer. For cost and freight terms, a seller will arrange for the payment on transportation and do port clearance. The buyer will take a risk once the good is loaded, and he will take the risk once the good is loaded before the seller send the goods to the destination. The buyer need to bear on transportation costs.
For seller responsibility in CIF is when seller is quoting CIF as their shipping Incoterms, which means they agree to take on the full burden of exporting and shipping the cargo up until the goods arrive aboard the vessel. Once the goods are safely loaded onto the boat, the buyer takes over responsibility to import and carry the products to the final destination, which buyer's responsibilities on the cargo is loaded onto the vessel. The seller transfers the shipment and all the risks to the buyer. The most popular method is CIF in particular because shipments will be more under control. Until the cargo is loaded at the origin port, the seller is in control of all costs. However, at the designated discharge port, the cost is transferred to the buyer. For CPT, seller is responsible for covering the cost of shipping the items to the specific location, the risk of loss or damaged product, as well as any additional charge resulting from circumstances that arise after the items have been given to the carrier are not the responsibility of the buyers. Seller draw the contract on customary terms at their own expense for the delivery of the items to the specific location through a customary route. They may choose the location that best serves his needs if one is not predetermined.
In addition to that, I like to discuss on carriage and insurance paid to or CIP. It means that the supplier's delivery is complete when the export customs procedures are completed. The insurance policy is paid and the items are passed to the forwarder for transportation to a specific destination specified in the agreement. The sum insured must be 110% of the agreement's value in the currency of the international agreement. After the products are delivered to the forwarder, all risks involved with their transportation pass from the supplier to the the recipient. CIP is concluded on the basis of an international contract of sale which specifies all responsibilities and the cost borne by each party. In most cases, the supplier is solely responsible for the delivery, insurance, and clearance of products to a certain location. Should buyer wish to have more insurance protection, it will need either to agree as much expressly with the seller or to make its own extra insurance arrangements. The next thing I'll share with you is delivered at place or DAP. It means that the supplier's delivery is complete when the goods are delivered to the recipient and ready for unloading at a specified place. The supplier must pay all export tariff and fees associated with delivering the products to the specified destination and unloading them. Supplier pays for export duty, packaging and cargo transportation to the port, loads to products on board, hires and pays the ship, provides the necessary documentation, and pays for unloading from the ship and delivery to the ultimate destination. The recipient unloads a vehicle on the spot, insures the goods at will, pays import duty, and obtains all necessary certificates and licenses. DAP is used to carry commodities using any mode of transportations. Alright, furthermore, delivered named place unloaded or DPU. DPU replaces the former Incoterm DAT or delivered at terminal. It means that the supplier delivery is complete when the goods are placed at the recipient's disposal at a specified location. All costs for export tariff and delivery of products to the stated destination, including unloading, must be borne by the supplier. Supplier pays for export duty, packing and cargo transportation to the port, loads the products on board, hires and pays the ship, engage in ship unloading, and optionally delivers and unloads at the destination. The recipient ensures the products at his or her discretion, pays import duty, and obtains all necessary certificates and licenses. DPUs are used to convey commodities by any mode of transportation.
Under the delivered duty paid DDP Incoterm rules, the seller assumes all responsibilities and costs for delivering the goods to be the named place of destination. The seller must pay both export and import formalities, fees, duty, and taxes. The seller is not obligated to insure the goods for pre-carriage or main carriage. The buyer is free of any risk or cost until the goods are unloaded from the vehicle at the named place of destination, usually the buyer's place of businesses. DDP is the only Incoterm rules place responsibility for import clearance and payment of taxes and or import duty on the seller. The seller is responsible for all costs and risks until the goods are unloaded.
In this group E, for the EXW system, the seller responsible are fulfilled once the good is depart from their store. After that, the buyer will take all risks and bear the cost until the goods come or arrive to destination. For this group F, main carriage unpaid. In this term, the shipment primary cost bear by the buyers. In this term also, the seller are required to deliver the goods instructed by the buyer. And in this term, corporate collection terms, they need to use shipment either by full container loader or less container loader.
Group C, main carriage paid. CFR. The cost and freight to deliver the products to the port destination are the seller's responsibility. However, risk is only relevant to maritime transit, and after the items have crossed to the ship's rail, the buyer assumes all liability. Insurance for the product is also not covered. Buyer is responsible for all insurance costs. CPT, although the risk is transferred when the products are sent to the first carrier, the seller is responsible for transportation to the specific point of destination. The seller delivers the goods to the carrier or another person nominated the seller at an agreed place. Besides that, the seller must contract for and pay the cost of carriage necessary to bring the goods to the named place of destination. Meanwhile, for CIF, the only difference between CIF and CFR is that the seller also needs to secure and pay for the buyer's insurance. Only maritime transportation is covered by this. For CIP, the seller delivers the good to the carrier or another person nominated the seller at an agreed place. The seller must contract for and pay the cost of carriage necessary to bring the goods to the named place of destination. For Group D is arrival. For DDP, up until the items are delivered, the seller covers all shipping expenses, assumes all risk and pays the GT. These rules impose the highest level of responsibility the seller and is the only one that calls for the seller to be in charge of import clearance and payment of taxes or import duties. It can be quite difficult for the seller to deal with the complicated and bureaucratic import clearance procedure in some countries. Thus, it is better left the buyer who is familiar with the area. Next is DAP. This product is given to the customer once they are prepared for unloading as part of the delivery process. This clause stated that the sellers are responsible for covering all transportation, which is related to expenses and risks to the specified location. Next is DAT. The seller pays for carriage to the terminal, except for costs related to import clearance, and assumes all risks up to the point that the goods are unloaded at the terminal.
Next, I will present on findings on Incoterms 2020. The International Chamber of Commerce has announced new Incoterms 2020, which go into effect on 1st January 2020. The ICC first issued Incoterms in 1936 and has since updated them to reflect changes in the global trade environment. It is critical that all trade participants understand the developments and how they affect global supply networks. Incoterms are extremely important in the world of global trade.
The main explanation of Incoterms 2020 have remained the same, with a few key updates and changes. The main changes included a new DPO term replacing DAT, along with the other changes to Incoterms as below. It is imperative that all parties involved in global trade understand these updates and how they may affect to the supply chain. First, new Incoterm, DPU replaced DAT. The previous Incoterm DAT delivered at terminal is now called DPU, delivered at place unloaded. It was decided to change the term to DPU to remove confusion that arose in the past. In the past, DAT required delivered at terminal unloaded. However, the word terminal caused confusion. The new DPU, delivered at place unloaded, covered any place whether covered or not. Second, different levels of insurance cover between CIF and CIP. CIF and CIP are the only two Incoterms that require the seller to purchase the insurance in the buyer's name. Under Incoterms 2010, the insurance cover for both CIF and CIP was required under Institute Cargo Clause C. Under new Incoterms 2020, CIP require insurance cover complying with Institute Cargo Clause A. Clause A cover more comprehensive level of insurance, which is usually suitable for manufactured goods, where Clause C would likely to apply to commodities. In summary, CIF remains the same. It requires Institute Cargo Clause C insurance covered number of listed risks subject to itemized exclusion. CIP now requires an upgrade to the Institute Cover A insurance cover all risks subject to itemized exclusions. Third, costs become quite a problem with the Incoterms 2010 with some parties. In some cases, carrier were changing their pricing, so sellers were often faced with new back charge terminal handling charges. Incoterms 2020 now provide much more detail around costs and now appear under the A9, B9 section of the rules. These clearly state which costs are allocated to each party. In the world with increasing security requirements, the Incoterms 2020 rules now provide more details about the security allocations and necessary costs. For each Incoterms rules, the security allocation has been added to A4/A7 and the associated cost has been added to the A9/B9. Number 5. Under Incoterms 2010, it was assumed that all transport would be undertaken by a third-party transport provider. Updates to Incoterms 2020 allows the provision for the buyers or seller own means of transport. This recognizes that some buyers and sellers are using their own methods of transport, including cars or planes, to get goods delivered. This allowed for the buyer's own means of transport under the FCA rules. This allowed the seller own means of transport under DAP, DPU, and DDP. Last will be explained by Iza.
Last but not least, Incoterms 2010 was revised to encourage exporters of containerized goods to utilize the FCA Incoterm. This is due to the fact that even seasoned sellers desire FOB since they desire the deal to be under a letter of credit. Consequently, Incoterms 2020 stipulates that the buyer must request the carrier to submit a transport document indicating that the items have been loaded, such as a bill of lading with an on-board statement. In the past, carriers commonly refused to issue a bill of lading with a notation to the seller if they acquired the goods through an intermediary transport such as truck rather than the seller directly. Being in charge of a worldwide standard is no easy undertaking. These international trade terms are determined by 13 ICC commissions comprised of business sectors specialized from around the globe. These individuals are expert in a variety of topics ranging from those of immediate concern to international business. According to the ICC, the group is comprised to worldwide specialists selected for their remarkable contributions to international commercial law and the International Chamber of Commerce throughout the years.
Next is choosing appropriate Incoterms. When a seller is required to obtain insurance to protect against risk during the shipment, the seller must do so in the buyer's name rather than his own, because doing so preserves the integrity of Incoterm. Example of FOB: once the items have been loaded onto the ship rather than after they pass the ship rail, the delivery obligation must be met. Although the risk of stowing is on the buyer, the seller is still responsible for paying the cost of loading. Next is CPT. With CPT, a loading shall be borne by the buyer except that it has to be borne by the seller pursuant to the agreement of transport. Next is DDP. Certain countries do not allow VAT taxes to be paid by anyone other than the local importer. Therefore, if the parties agrees on DDP, it will be VAT excluded. CIF, the moment when the risk is passed on the buyer will take place when the goods are delivered on board of ship.